Yeah, good.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Committee of Adjustment meeting to order now and introduce the committee members and staff. Committee members in attendance this evening are Kevin Antonitis, Dylan Bailey is online, and myself, Daniel Collins. Members Adam Mottershead and Fabia Billings send their regrets tonight. Staff members present this evening are Walter Basic, Deputy Director of Planning, and Dilahara Abby Warden, Secretary Treasurer. Live streaming. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are live streamed by the Town of Grimsby. Individuals and media may be audibly and or visually recorded during this meeting. As a reminder, all electronic devices are to be in silent mode during our committee meeting. For an overview of meeting procedures, the purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to speak. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. To request a copy of the decision, please email Dilahara Abby Warden, Secretary Treasurer at coa@grimsby.ca. The applicant, the Town of Grimsby, the minister, or a specified person or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, within 20 days of the date of giving of notice under subsection 17 is completed for a consent application and within 20 days of the date of a decision for a minor variance application. Specified persons and certain public bodies include public utilities, but do not include an individual or community association. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through me, the chair. Each applicant will be provided 5 minutes to speak. Each applicant may only speak once. If you hear your comment presented by someone else, please do not duplicate the remarks. When you are called, we ask that you state your name and address for the record. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. All members of the committee have viewed the properties on the agenda tonight and are familiar with the lands that are subject to the applications. Do any members of the committee have a pecuniary interest with respect to the applications that are before us this evening? I see none. We will now consider the adoption of the agenda. Would someone please make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Okay, Kevin moves to adopt the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Kevin, okay. We'll vote on that. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, the agenda has been adopted. Thank you. Are there any requests for referral are there any requests for withdrawal or adjournment? Okay. So there is one request for deferral. And from what I understand, both parties are in favor of the deferral. So would I be able to get a motion to move on that one? Okay. Yeah, Kevin beat you to it. Kevin moves that that application A0125 for 9 Doran Avenue be deferred until next meeting. Do I have a seconder for that one? Dylan? Okay, thank you. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, that has been successful. That application will be deferred until our meeting next month. The next, have committee members had the opportunity to review the minutes from January 21, 2025, and are there any questions or comments about the minutes? I see none. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that?
So moves, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And seconded? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, so we have approved the minutes from last month. Thank you very much. Tonight we have 3 more applications before us. And we're going to first hear A0225 for 24 Casablanca Boulevard, and I will turn it over to Dil Hera for a presentation on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just get the presentation full screen. Okay, so the purpose of this application is to facilitate a secondary suite in a cellar and to facilitate the construction of a secondary suite in an accessory building. The variances requested are to permit a secondary suite in a cellar, whereas a secondary suite is not permitted solely within a cellar. To permit a maximum of 3 parking spaces, whereas 4 parking spaces are required, and to permit a maximum height of an accessory building of 6.8 meters, whereas 4.6 meters is permitted. This is an image of the site plan, which was circulated along with the notice of hearing. This is an image of the neighborhood for context. These are the current conditions on site. And these are the agencies that have provided comments, and I will summarize those comments for you now. Planning staff have no objections to the minor variances proposed by the applicant. They have reviewed the application in the context of the 4 tests set out under Section 45 of the Planning Act and are of the opinion that the minor variance meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, is appropriate for the development of the lands, and is minor in nature. Public Works staff do not have any comments but offers the following condition. Town staff will require lot grading and drainage plan demonstrating that stormwater runoff will not negatively impact nor rely upon neighboring properties. The plan shall include all proposed downspout discharge locations, all hardscape surfaces such as driveways, walkways, patios, etc., and all physical features including hydrants, decks, etc. for both existing and proposed. The plan shall also note the location of the existing services, water, sanitary, storm, etc. to property line and the extension of services to the building face. The NPCA commented to say that there are no features regulated by the NPCA that currently traverse this address. As such, they do not have any objections to the proposed minor variance, and the region has no comments. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is the agent or owner here would like to speak to the application, please?
I'm the agent for that property, Chair. And I believe the owner is also present in chambers.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak and just state your name and address for the record, please?
It's Melissa Torres, and I'm the agent for 24 Casablanca Boulevard.
Do you have anything that you would like to add to the application?
No, it was pretty straightforward. We even reviewed the comments and we agreed with the comments from Public Works. I'm here just to answer any questions if there are any members of the public that had concerns, but it seems like the planning committee do agree with what we've submitted.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone on the committee that would like to ask a question about this application? No, okay. Anyone in the public would like to speak to this application? Yeah, okay. Come to the lectern and just state your name and address for the record, please.
There we go. My name's Adam Schumacher. I'm here with my partner, Emily Diemert, and we are the property owners of 28 Casablanca Boulevard, 2 properties north of the subject property. So overall, I mean, like, we're in favor of densification in general. We need more houses for people to live in. And the parking spaces, the accessory unit solar, we don't really have any concerns with those. The only thing that we do have a concern with is the height of the accessory building. It's 6.8 by measurement, and the gable looks like it's going to be 7.4 meters above ground. I did a little bit of math, and my Pythagorean theorem isn't perfect, but coming from our backyard, that would put the height of this building, as far as sight lines go, in line with the top of the escarpment. And it would be the most prominent feature visible from the backyard and also from the front of the street, because there are no more than one-story buildings on that stretch of street in Casablanca. I'm a transplant from Hamilton, and one of the reasons why, well, a few reasons why I moved here, but a reason why I'm not planning on leaving here is it's a very unique biosphere, unique landscape. And that sort of view of the escarpment is something that I think is valuable, and I think that would be adversely affected if the plan were to go ahead as designed here. Again, to be clear, not objecting to the idea of a accessory building or adding additional units, but I do object to the height. If this were a one-story building or no higher than the existing structures, I would have no objection. But as it stands, I would ask that it be denied, or at least denied in part. And I think my partner Emily has some things to add.
Okay, yeah, please. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of staff, members of the public. My name is Emily, as my partner mentioned. I am also a homeowner at 28 Casablanca Boulevard. My family has lived on Casablanca Boulevard for 3 generations. I am the third. My grandparents moved here in the early 1960s when their home was the sole house on the street with only a dirt road and acres of fruit trees for neighbors. They lived and raised their 4 boys there until my parents bought and moved into our family home after the death of my grandfather in 2009, where I also lived until I left to pursue my education a few years later. However, evidently, I made the decision to move back to Grimsby and, more to the point, to Casablanca Boulevard with my partner in 2020. And we made this decision, as he mentioned, not only to be closer to my family and now neighbors, but also because this part of Grimsby is a truly remarkable place. The natural beauty of the escarpment is part of what makes Grimsby so special and was the impetus for us to uproot our lives and begin a new chapter in this town. When I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer in 2022, I was unable to hike the Bruce Trail, a thing that I truly adore so much. And so instead, I spent time sitting on my deck and spending time with the escarpment that way. I'm aware that this is an immense privilege, and I am grateful to have had such a place to spend time with nature while fighting an insidious disease, and I am equally grateful to have had access to it during my recovery. In the last few years, I believe community members in Grimsby have become increasingly aware of how precious the natural beauty of our town is, and mindful of how rapid development has increasingly cut us off from the natural world. I don't think it is a controversial opinion that we would all prefer to look at the majesty of the escarpment than be confronted by slabs of brick and stucco. In this, I want to argue that a variance to build a 2-story dwelling in the backyard of 24 Casablanca is not in line with the character of our community. No other homeowner on this street has ventured to obstruct their neighbor's sightline in such a way. And frankly, I believe doing so is not only short-sighted for future generations who may choose to live here, but is unneighborly to those who already reside here. As I said, Grimsby is a special place because of our ability to be in connection with the nature around us. It's why I came back. Do we want to be like everybody else and be boxed in by walls of our own making? To be clear, I am strongly in support of increasing housing density, and I look forward to meeting the new occupants of the proposed units on 24 Casablanca Boulevard. However, I believe that it is necessary to be mindful of how new members are brought into our existing communities and whether this variance will create conflict by compromising the character of our street. As such, I am asking this committee to reject this application as it stands and ask the applicant to reconsider submitting with a single-story accessory building not exceeding the height of other outbuildings in the area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Emily and Adam, for speaking. I'd just like to call on the agent. Would you be able to speak to the height and why it's required that you have this variance?
Yeah, so the homeowners are seeking the variance twofold. So essentially the parking requirements, we're hoping to, if someone does move into that accessory dwelling, that they can now have their own individual parking, which is why we're seeking to alleviate and maintain the existing parking requirements. So essentially, based on the design purposes and from a design stand of view, we would want it to be that height so that a future person living there can then have their own set of parking, can park and then access their area, which would be on the second story.
Thank you. I have a question for staff, if that's okay, just on this same topic. In your report, I believe you said that the accessory unit is subordinate to the house. And could you just elaborate on that and how you came to that conclusion?
It's, well, there are a number of ways you can reach that conclusion. One of the conclusions is the amount of living space that's available on the second floor of that building would be substantially smaller than the living space on the main floor of the existing dwelling.
Thank you. So it's not subordinate in height, it's just subordinate in area to the house?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Yeah, please come to the lectern and provide your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Diemert, and I live at number 26. Can I question the agent again? I'm not sure I understand how the 2 stories we're not objecting to the parking. We object to the 2 stories. We're in the same boat where we've lived there for 15 years and all of the houses are 1 story. It's a great little neighborhood. We take care of each other. We make cookies for our neighbors kind of thing. But the 2 stories is going to interfere with our privacy in our backyard, and it's also going to interfere with our view of the escarpment, which is something that adds a great deal of value to our life and our property value. So our question again is, like, we don't have an objection to it being a duplex. We don't have an objection to it being an accessory building or with 3 separate families living there. We object to the 2 stories. We don't understand why it needs to be a 2-story building in order to be effective, in order to accomplish the goal of bringing in 3 families there. So that's our concern.
I can quickly speak on that just to answer a question. Essentially, based on the design point of view, our whole reason for this is to provide independent parking for that unit so that it doesn't hinder parking on the street, so that it doesn't affect the neighbors in that perspective. So ideally, it would be maintaining the parking spots, allowing that tenant to then use their own parking facilities, and then they would have access to their own unit so that it's more self-isolating. Is there a concern in terms of privacy? I heard you mention that. Like, what is the concern for privacy from that perspective? Are you afraid that they might peek into your dwelling? Is that the concern?
If it's a 2-story building, again, I'm really not following how the parking is the reason for the 2-story building. But if it's a 2-story building, their windows out of their dwelling will overlook our backyard and our pool and a place that we use a great deal. So there is a privacy concern there.
I believe just if I can try and add some clarity, the 2-story is a result of the parking being on the 1st story. So the 2nd story would be a dwelling unit. I think I'm correct on that.
Yes.
We can give you a chance to speak if you'd like. Yep. Okay. Yeah, bottom's a garage, and then they're going to have a dwelling unit on the top of that. That's the plan so far. But you've just mentioned the overlook into the backyard. You're not in favor of that as well.
There's a lot of room to park there, so they could park in front of the building and still there would be plenty of room. So again, the garage underneath, it doesn't actually add up.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Steve Diemert. I live at number 26 as well. I guess we're still talking about the same issues, privacy, sightline. I understand the existing bylaw, 15 feet when you consider a roof you don't have windows peering over at your neighbors. Really, that's the only objection I have to any of this, is just the height of the building and where it's situated, so.
Okay.
Thank you for your-
Yeah, thank you, Steve and Stephanie. Yeah, would the owner like to come, to the lectern? That'd be great.
Name's Deb Bolvet. So I live in Grimsby. I've lived in Grimsby for 22 years. We live on Tamarack. So I understand the whole, like, 2 streets over. I understand the sightline. The escarpment is beautiful. We live in a 2-story house. The entire street is 2-story. And we have a pool in the backyard. However, what I'm trying to say is that we're removing the existing garage. So that's going to be gone, and then we're pushing the garage back, and then we're going to have an apartment above that. So essentially, there's going to be the house, the bungalow, with 2 separate units. It has, and then another, the garage with an apartment above that. Does that clarify it a bit?
Yep, thank you. I got, Dylan has his hand up from the committee. Dylan, would you like to say something?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want clarity on the sight lines. Are there windows on that side of the the proposed upper dwelling?
Yes, so there are windows there, but just quickly looking at the design, we could always alter the windows to now face into the existing dwelling, so the existing lot. So we could then abide by the Ontario Building Code if that would be a requirement, or obviously it would be a requirement, but if that would be a requirement of them not having windows on that side. We could always change the layout, alternate it, so now that the windows are facing on the dwelling, like within that lot, if that makes any sense. And then I just also would like to clarify just to the public, within the zoning, so majority of the zoning in that area is RD2. You're permitted to go up to 9 meters in an existing dwelling. We are way below that. So if in the future they wanted to add a second story onto the dwellings and stuff like that, that would be permitted technically under the bylaw, as you could go up to 9 meters. We are well below that limit as well.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand up in the audience. Come on up to the lectern. Thank you.
So to be clear, I understand the zoning laws, but that is for the main dwelling, not accessory buildings. Is that correct?
Sorry, say that again?
So the height limitations that were explained as they're well below, that is for the main dwelling,
Yep.
which is not really the issue in question. It is for an accessory building, which is in the line of sight of all of the neighbors' sight line. So that is the first question. But I'm also curious why if other options have been looked into. There is quite a substantial front yard on 24 Casablanca. Is it not possible to extend the driveway there to allow for additional parking spaces? Are there alternatives? We are looking to be good neighbors. We're looking to find compromise. We would like to figure this out together and not have it be contentious.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Adam, you want to speak too?
Yeah, and just on that, again, we would have no objection to having a parking spot adjacent to that structure. Again, it's really just like how much is going to rise above the fence line. That's our only concern. And we want to make sure that...
Sorry, we can't have any crosstalk. If you can address it through the chair, and then...
Sorry.
No, it's okay. And then you'll have your chance to respond afterwards.
But again, that's really the only concern. Again, we would have no objection if there were a pad adjacent to the new structure. In front of the house, I understand it'd be more convenient to have it next to the structure. There still appears to be plenty of room in the yard to be able to go out as opposed to up. And again, that's really just our main concern.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Emily, to address what you said, you are correct. They were referring to a house or the dwelling itself, not the accessory. But I do want to pose that question to the owner or the agent. Has it been considered that the parking be external to the structure and the structure be a single story?
We have considered it, but we want that dwelling unit to be its own self-sufficient unit. We want whoever gets put into that dwelling, that structure, to feel that they aren't creating like any animosity with the person living in the main unit, that they're self-sufficient, self-reliant, they have their own space, can feel that they're not going to be imposing on the person residing in that principal dwelling. That's the whole reasoning. With that said, again, I have no problem with the design if the concern is that the windows are facing to the public, to any neighbors. We can always alternate the plan and rotate where the windows would be facing on the interior of that structure. Just to kind of go back to the height, so the reason why I bring that up, I understand it's a concern for views, but within the RD2 zone, if the concern is a view, any structure on that zoning can now go to 9 meters. So at any point, the view could ultimately be obstructed because the zoning does permit to go 9 meters. So I would ask the neighbors to just kind of keep that in mind when they're seeing the design.
I have a follow-up, if I may. You said that it's going to be like kind of a self-contained unit, but I see 2 parking spaces in that garage. Do both of those parking spaces belong to that accessory dwelling unit? Or is
To that
one
garage, correct.
Or is one spot for the basement?
Nope, so again, we're trying to maintain the existing parking spaces, so there would be 1 parking space for the dwelling unit that's in the front, and then it would be the 2 in the back, ideally.
And both of them in the back are for the accessory dwelling unit?
Yes, because we haven't finalized the full design, and we're proposing potentially making it a 2-bedroom unit.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Sorry, before I let you speak? No?
Just, yeah, I had a question,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. We've heard from somebody at 26 and 28, correct? What about on the south side? It would appear that the most impact would come from the people on the south side adjacent. Is anybody here representing them, or have we heard from them? Because that seems to be the lot that's most affected, as it's, 4 feet from the property line? So I'm just curious if you've heard from them or talked to them.
I would like to make a comment in terms of.
Oh, sorry, I have to have you, it's mostly for the people online.
I understand.
Yeah,
No
sorry.
problem. Yep.
So, in regards to my neighbors at 22, I guess, I cannot speak for them. Obviously, they're not present, but I can say that both myself and my neighbors at 26 did not actually receive notification of this hearing until I believe the 11th. It was on the paper, it said it was submitted on the February 4th, and we were only given until Friday to indicate our comments. So the amount of time that at least we received to actually give feedback, that is why we are here tonight. So it doesn't feel conducive to community consultation to try and get that fast of a turnaround. So I cannot speak for them in particular, but I can say it felt our time felt very pressed to respond to this. So we were able to make it, but potentially other community members might not have been able to.
Just to
Okay.
speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
They actually have helped us put the headers in and stuff, so we've worked with the people right beside us, so the south side, I guess. Yeah, so they've used the driveway and things like that, so we're very familiar with them, we're friendly with them. We actually submitted this, I think, Melissa, like in December, isn't that correct?
Yes, we did.
So I'm not sure why, yeah,
Yeah, that's down. Do you want to speak to that, Delhara?
Yeah, so you mean to say you submitted the application in December, right? Yeah, so it took, basically it could take a whole month to process the application because it has to be checked for completeness. Then the notices have to be prepared, and this notice was actually mailed out on the 4th of February. So I'm not sure why it didn't get to your neighbors until the 11th, because it could be due to, potential delays in the mail, the backlog or whatever it was. But we are required to give 10 days notice by law. So that's why it was mailed on the 4th.
Yeah, so I don't know. Not going to be a huge dwelling. I don't think it's going to impact your view of the escarpment in terms of viewing the escarpment. It's the garage. Well, I live 2 streets over, and like I said, every backyard is you can see the escarpment from multiple areas of your backyard. So there might be a section where you don't view it, but it's going to be, pushed back, and it's a massive backyard. So I'm not sure how that's going to affect, especially even if you're further away. So I don't think it's going to impact you as much as you think.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Walter, or a comment.
No, thank you, Chair. I just have a question. We were under the impression that each parking space would be, before I ask that question, it's my understanding that there is proposed a dwelling unit in the basement of the main dwelling. That's right. And it's my understanding that there are only 3 parking spaces proposed. So the 2 parking spaces that were mentioned by your agent, if both are dedicated to the unit above the garage, then where are the other 2 parking spaces that are required for each of the other units?
That's why we're seeking relief from that requirement of the zoning bylaw. We're essentially, based on Bill 23, we're trying to maintain what's currently there. So maintain the existing parkings that are there, and then address the requirement for the new dwelling.
Right, so the requirement, we're not permitted to require more than 1 space per new accessory dwelling unit. So that would be 1 space for the basement, 1 space above the garage, but the dwelling itself requires 2, the main dwelling unit. So that was 4. So you're requesting relief from the requirement, and it was our understanding that each unit would have at least 1 parking space. The way you're describing it, each unit, the garage unit would have 2 spaces. One of the units in the house would have 1 space, which doesn't leave any spaces for the 3rd unit. So it's not, that's not the understanding that we had when we reviewed the application. That's really all I'm saying.
Okay. So I can kind of, I guess, comment on that. So essentially 3 parking spaces are required currently. For the design, we're proposing 2 parking spots there. Essentially, we just want to maintain the existing parking that's currently there, which I believe is 1 or 2 parking spots. For that, we put an extra parking spot because we don't know if it's going to be a 2-unit dwelling within that contained unit. I guess that's all I can offer for now, but we're seeking the relief because it's our understanding based on Bill 23 that parking requirements are not essential or no longer needed.
Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, sorry, just for the committee's benefit, the requirement doesn't enable the municipality to require more than 1 parking space per accessory dwelling unit. So, but it doesn't address the main dwelling unit, so the principal dwelling unit. So the principal dwelling unit, our zoning bylaw requires 2, and we could still require one per accessory dwelling unit. So that's where the requirement for 4 is. What we're saying is that if there are 3 parking spaces proposed, we didn't have an objection to the 3 parking spaces as long as each unit had at least 1 space. What I'm hearing tonight is that one of the units is going to have 2 spaces, which leaves only 1 space for the remaining 2.
Yeah, I don't.
So that's not something we can support.
Melissa, I don't think that's correct.
That's the way,
Yeah.
that's the way your
apartment-
agent, that's the
yeah.
way your agent described it. That's all
Yeah.
I'm saying.
No, the apartment up, like, above the garage will only have one side of that. Correct? Yeah, yeah. The person that's living above will only have one side of the garage.
Okay, then if I may, and if that's the case, I still can't get my head wrapped around why the parking has to be under the dwelling unit. Because if it's outside of it, 1 space can occupy or be assigned to the accessory dwelling unit in the yard, and then 1 can be assigned to the basement accessory dwelling unit. And then that keeps the accessory building down to a single story. Do you want to speak to that?
Say it again, sorry?
So my original question when I was asking about why the parking was underneath and not outside, the answer was that they were both intended for kind of like a package unit for the dwelling that's above the parking. But if they're not both for that, would a compromise be to have the parking in front of the accessory dwelling unit, not underneath it, and then that limits that down to a single story?
Yeah, we could do that, but it would take up a lot more space.
More space.
But I would think that would impact the escarpment a lot more. Do you know what I'm saying?
It would be longer, but it would be lower.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I do have a question, Chair. Maybe Walter can refresh us, because we get into this discussion all the time in many, many years of doing this committee of adjustment, is the right to a view. What's the act say, or what does legislation say, or case law say about the right to a view? If you want the view, you got to buy the view. In other words, you got to be right on it. You don't necessarily have a right to a view. It's nice to have, we all enjoy it, but if someone takes that view away, you don't really have a right to go after them. And I'm not mistaken on that. Am I correct on that, Walter? Because we get into this all the time with these variances.
Thank you. Yeah, I've experienced several circumstances at Ontario Land Tribunal or Ontario Municipal Board hearings where the issue of view was discussed, and the conclusion has always consistently been that an individual or a property owner does not have the right to a view over somebody else's property. Because the views can be blocked by trees, they can be blocked by fences, they can be blocked by many things that don't require planning approval, especially in situations where, say, a 2-story building can be built in the same location as the accessory building in this particular case, and without any requirement for planning approval, like for minor variance or zoning amendment or anything like that. All they would require is a building permit. So if a building can be erected on the site 2 stories, whether it's an accessory building or whether it's part of the main building, is not really, doesn't change the fact that it would block the view, or a tree could block the view, as an example. So that's, in short, views aren't a right. Views over somebody else's property aren't a right. And that's the consistent conclusion that I've heard tribunal officers come to.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a resolution from anyone in the committee at this time? Dylan? Okay, go ahead.
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I want to make sure I have the right one. Be it resolved that minor variance application A02-2524 Casablanca Boulevard to permit an accessory suite in a cellar whereas a secondary suite is not permitted solely within a cellar as per section 4.19D in zoning bylaw 1445 as amended, to permit a maximum of 3 parking spaces where 4 parking spaces are required as per section 5.1 table 3 in zoning bylaw 14-45 as amended, to permit a maximum height of an accessory building of 6.8 meters, 22.31 feet, whereas 4.6 meters, 14.76 feet is permitted as per section 4.8 table 2 in zoning bylaw 1445 be as amended, be approved because it meets the that does meet the 4 tests with the one condition that was read out by the committee secretary earlier.
Okay, thank you.
I so move.
Thank you, Dylan. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'd like to make a suggestion on the conditions, though. I mean, there was some concern about overlook, and I would agree with that. If we could minimize the number of window spaces, I can't see them removing all the windows on the south side, to be honest. I mean, that's where your son's coming from. But your design shows almost all window or half window on that elevation. Could we make a recommendation that the number of window space be reduced? I don't know if you can do a percentage or a square footage. And the only other thing I just noticed now is the deck going out the south side. I mean, that to me, depending on the width of it, is that part of the variance, Walter, the width of the deck? Is that part of the application? Because, you know, the size of the deck, if it becomes a large deck on the side, 2 stories up, overlooking the backyard, that would be a bit of a concern too. So I'm in favor of the application overall, but I'd like to minimize maybe some of the impact with respect to the windows and the size of the deck out the back as a suggested condition for your motion, Dylan. If you're amenable to that.
Yeah, I'm certainly amenable to that, Kevin. Yeah, sorry, I just, in my paperwork, I couldn't find I can't sort of see that elevation with the windows, so I'm happy to, you know, acquiesce to whatever wording we think is fair, so.
Maybe the applicant could suggest a reduction in a square footage or a size of windows. And again, part of the deck is okay, like a small deck is okay, just for access, emergency access. But limiting it to that width, I think is fair, the 6 feet. I just don't want to see it becoming a 12-foot deck or something up there on the second floor.
Well, to add to it, it was suggested that the windows are on the opposite sides, I believe. Would that? Flip it around? Yeah.
So if you flip the elevation, so there's 2 windows on the south instead of the north, as you show, in other words, flip the design, I'm okay with that. That's a fair compromise.
Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, we can do that. We can revisit the design. So I think just to kind of add it from an Ontario Building Code perspective, I believe we are only allowed a certain amount of percentage of glazing on that side anyways, closest to that interior lot line. So we can always flip the rotation if that works best.
Okay, thank you. Walter had his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, forgive me if I got this wrong, but it's my understanding that the people that have a concern over the overlook are on the north side, and that's where there are less windows now.
Yeah, that's assuming they got notice and didn't care about it. But I think the distance, you're on the north side, but I think your distance, to be honest, is far enough away from the window side of this. I'm not worried about the impact as so much as the people that aren't here and did not have an opportunity to speak. I'm thinking of their interest that if you flip it, there's only 2 windows facing their backyard 4 feet away or whatever the side yard is. Whereas yours is, I mean, it's a 75-foot lot. So it's a pretty significant distance, especially for the second 28, I guess it would be. So I don't have a problem with flipping it as a condition, Dylan, the design on the second floor.
Sure, that's fine. That we add a second condition that the design be flipped.
Okay, but before we do, Walter wants to add something. Please go ahead.
Sir.
Yeah, I just want you to be cognizant that if you're considering approving this application, that there are building code requirements for bedrooms, for window sizes. So I wouldn't want you to compromise or arrive at a decision that is contrary to the requirements of the building code. So you just be careful on how you word it.
Okay, I'll leave it to you guys to come up with some verbiage.
Maybe the
Kevin,
applicant, does the applicant have a floor plan at all? Melissa?
Yes, I did submit it. Let me see if it'll let me share my screen. Because I do have it from the agenda. Give me 1 second.
And can we conclude that the windows, if it was flipped, that they would be of the size shown here? In other words, regular bedroom-sized windows? Because the one shown now facing south appears to be like either a living room or a bigger bay window of some sort that's currently facing south. I mean,
Yellow. That makes sense. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to pull that agenda up again.
I can bring up the floor plan if you want.
Yes, please.
Yep.
right. If you're looking at the house, north is left, south is right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Garage.
Oh, sorry.
The bottom of the picture is.
Garage.
Facing.
Want to put your mic on?
So the north is to the left.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So, oh, sorry.
Oh, that's what you're looking at, okay.
So if I may add, we can essentially flip that floor plan. So we can make the hallway on the other side and flip the bedrooms. So essentially what you would see on the 4 windows would go now be 4 windows on the inside and then the 2 windows on the other side.
Well, even if I look at that, it's not necessarily the floor plan itself, but the number of windows. So if they're left to that side, like the north side, having the most, like you show here, assuming it meets building code, though.
Yeah, I have to do a glazing calculation. Sorry, give me 1 second. So I guess I just want to add to that. If right now, the reason why we originally did it is because the bedrooms are on the inside of the property. Does that make sense? We didn't want people to feel exactly like the neighbors are feeling, where they feel like their privacy is pretty much infringed upon, like someone's watching them from their bedroom. So we had originally put it where it was on that side. I have no problem flipping it like that. It should meet once I do the glazing calculations. But I just kind of want to bring that up since that was a concern from the public.
Might I suggest, just for the sake of a suggestion, that you leave the motion as is, and then we leave it, because the person we're protecting isn't here. But if they helped with the headers and you have a relationship with them, perhaps that conversation happens. What would they want to see? And leave it up between you and them to decide. I would suggest that to the committee for what it's worth.
I'm okay with that. And does it meet the side yard then, Walter, already, as proposed? Like there's no side yard variance required, even though they're going 2 stories effectively, or the height on the accessory building?
That's correct. Yeah, there's no required variance for side yard.
Okay, so it's moved by Dylan. It's going to stay as is. There is one condition. Do you want to second it? Okay, Kevin's going to second it. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? It's me. But it's carried. So this is subject to a 20-day appeal process before it becomes legal and binding. Thank you. The next application we have before us is A0425, 76 Elm Tree Road West. And I'll put it to Dale Hara to present on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this application is to facilitate the construction of a new single-story dwelling and an accessory building. The variances requested are to permit a maximum lot coverage of 16%, whereas a maximum lot coverage of 7.5% is permitted, and to specifically permit the erection of a building as a dwelling on a lot where another dwelling already exists, whereas Section 4.7A of Zoning Bylaw 1445 as amended does not permit the erection of any dwelling on a lot where another dwelling already exists. This is an image of the site plan, which was circulated along with the notice of hearing. This is a picture of the neighborhood for context. These are the current conditions on site. And this is what is proposed. These are some of the elevations of the proposed building. And these are the agencies that have provided comments or feedback, and I will summarize those for you now. Planning staff have no objections to the approval of the minor variances for relief from the zoning bylaw as amended with respect to the maximum lot coverage and to specifically permit the erection of a building as a dwelling on a lot where another dwelling already exists, provided the following conditions are met. Number one, that the existing dwelling shall be removed following the occupancy of the newly constructed dwelling. And two, the applicant enter into an agreement with the town in accordance with Section 45, 9.1 of the Planning Act to implement Condition 1 and 2. Public Works staff have one comment and one condition. Their comment is, at the building permit stage, the applicant shall apply for an entrance permit for removal of existing driveways and to construct the proposed driveway access onto Elm Tree Road West for review and approval by the town staff. And their condition is that town staff will require lot grading and drainage plan demonstrating that stormwater runoff will not negatively impact nor rely upon neighboring properties. The plan shall include all proposed downspout discharge locations, all hardscape surfaces such as driveways, walkways, patios, etc., and all physical features including hydrants, decks, etc. for both existing and proposed. The plan shall also note the location of all existing and proposed septic systems, wells, and cisterns. To summarize, the region has the following comments. Regional Growth Management and Planning staff do not object to the proposed minor variance application as the proposed development is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial and regional policies subject to the following conditions. Number one, that the existing dwelling be demolished upon issuance of the occupancy permit for the proposed new dwelling. Two, that the applicant owner submit the acceptance letter from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for the completed archaeological assessment. If the ministry requires further archaeological work to be completed prior to acknowledging this report, these reports must also be submitted to and acknowledged by the ministry to the satisfaction of Niagara region prior to clearance of this condition. No demolition, grading, or other soil disturbances shall take place on the subject property prior to the issuance of a letter from MCM through Niagara region, confirming that all archaeological resource concerns have met licensing and resource conservation requirements. Number three, that the owner be informed of the following advisory clause. If deeply buried or previously undiscovered archaeological remains or resources are found during development activities on the subject lands, all activities must stop immediately. If the discovery of is human remains, contact the Niagara Regional Police Services and coroner to secure the site. If the discovery is not human remains, the area must be secured to prevent site disturbance. The project proponent must then follow the steps outlined in the Niagara Region Archaeological Management Plan, Appendix C, found on the website. Number 4, that a new sewage system meeting Ontario Building Code requirements is applied for and installed to service the new dwelling, and the existing sewage system is decommissioned to the satisfaction of Niagara Region. The NPCA has the following comment: there are no features regulated by the NPCA which currently traverse this address. As such, the NPCA offers no objections to the proposed minor variances at this address. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is the agent or owner here that would like to speak to the application? Please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Lori Lutz, 76 Elm Tree Road West in Grimsby.
And my name is Ed Lutz, 76 Elm Tree Road West, Grimsby.
Is there anything you'd like to add to the application at this time?
There is nothing we would like to add.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Do we have any questions from the committee? I see none. Anyone in the public wish to speak to this? Anybody online? I see none. Okay, do we have a motion for this application? Okay, Kevin?
Resolved that minor variance application A425 for 76 Elm Tree Road West to permit a maximum lot coverage of 16%, whereas the maximum lot coverage of 7.5% is permitted as per section 621, table 7 in zoning bylaw 1445 is amended to specifically permit the erection of a building and dwelling on a lot where another dwelling already exists, whereas 4.7A of zoning bylaw 1445 is amended does not permit the erection of any dwelling on a lot where another dwelling already exists. Reasons being that it's minor in nature, meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, and is appropriate for the development and use of the property with the conditions. I won't read them all, I'll just highlight that the key one here, that the existing dwelling shall be removed following the occupancy of the newly constructed dwelling. And then to enforce that, the applicant enter into a town or agreement with the town in accordance to section 4591 of the Planning Act to implement condition 1 or 2. That's always the biggest concern. The rest were standard and were read already. So that's my motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Dylan, you're going to second that. Okay.
Yeah, Kevin, sorry, just a quick question on the conditions. Number 1 and 4. I'm assuming are the same, but are slightly different. I don't know if just having both in there covers us off between occupancy and occupancy permit, and if for planning purposes, it's the same thing. I'm assuming it is, so I'm happy to leave it as is, but.
Yep. I'll defer to Walter on that. I'm assuming they're just repeating themselves in different, saying the same thing in a different way.
If I may say, so one of the conditions was by the planning department, the other one was from the region. So yeah, we can just combine them into one.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm in favor, thank you. Or I second.
Okay.
Sorry, may I add something to that?
Yeah, please go ahead, Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that the one condition regarding the agreement refers to, so you just remove the correct one so that the reference is made to the same requirement regarding the agreement.
Yep. Well, the only reason we emphasize is we had somebody come in after they built the second one and then try to get a variance to keep the first one up, right? And that's the only reason why. And they had an agreement and everything too. So there's people that try to get around that. But I just want to emphasize that no problem to replace it, but we just didn't want to see a second one created.
Okay, so before we put this to a vote, do we have to remove one of these? No, just leave it as is? Okay. All right, so that's moved by Kevin and seconded by Dylan. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. No one is opposed, so that is carried, and there is a 20-day appeal period before it's final and binding. Thank you. Our last application for this evening is A0525, 133 and 137 Main Street East. I'll turn it to Dilhara for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this application is to amend the number of required parking spaces provided by the OLT to reflect the reduced density. The variances required to reduce the number of required parking spaces to 173, whereas 189 parking spaces are required. and to replace Schedule 78 of Appendix A to bylaw number 1445 as amended with respect to setbacks and stepbacks from Main Street as illustrated in the attached plan drawn in red. So that is the site plan that was circulated along with the notice. And this is an image of the neighborhood for context. These are the current conditions on site. This is what is proposed, some elevations of what is proposed on the site. And these are the agencies that have provided comments, and I will summarize that for you now. Planning staff have no objections to the approval. It's okay, thanks. Of the minor variance for relief from the zoning bylaw as amended with respect to the required parking and minimum setbacks and stepbacks of the building. Public Works staff and the region do not have any comments or conditions. The NPCA has the following comment to say that no features regulated by the NPCA traverse the subject site at this time, and therefore the NPCA offers no objections. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is the agent or owner here wishing to speak to the application?
Turned it off. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Jared Marcus from Arcadis. Corporate address is 360 James Street North in Hamilton. I did have a few slides to provide some additional context for the committee and the public. I don't see anyone in the public here, but for the committee, there are some additional slides. Do I have the button or do I just say proceed? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you saw this, the image on Ms. Aberwaidens. I'm sorry. I've been trying, and so to provide some additional context, the subject lands are in the east of Hamilton, close to the under construction West Memorial Hospital. You can see them outlined on red there at the northeast corner of Nellis Road and Main Street East, immediately adjacent to the former Coles greenhouse, which is also under a development approval or development project under approvals. The subject lands contain a two-story structure. It's officially known as the James Willison Grouton Nellis House. It is a designated heritage structure, which is proposed to be retained through the development process. That's the structure closest to the intersection. To the east or to the right of that structure is a one-story coach house. It is built in the 60s, but is not a heritage structure, and it will not be saved through the development process. As you're likely aware, there's a long history to this site. In 2019, zoning bylaw and official plan amendment applications were submitted to the town and reviewed and ultimately appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And that process was concluded in May of 2023. Since that time, we've worked with the owners of the property to move forward with site plan application, and that's still an ongoing process with town staff. It is, I'll get into a little bit of next context on the next slide, but that process is under a bit of a tight timeline with some CMHC applications, and our clients are hopeful that we'll have approvals with the town. The site plan approval wrapped up in April, and they're going to be constructing the building hopefully in September. So next slide, please. So we're dealing with the difference between two applications. At the OLT, we were proposing a residential condominium application, and it was proposing a 5-story building with 147 residential units, 228 square meters of commercial in the heritage structure, and 268 square meters of commercial in the new apartment building. That was all served by 189 surface and underground parking spaces. which is approximately 1.29 spaces per unit. We're referring to it as a blended parking unit rate. So as that was 2019 applications, not resolved till quite late 2023, there's been an obvious change in the housing market, and our clients are moving forward with a purpose-built rental development instead of condominium, and so there's usually a difference in the type of suites available for rental versus condominium sales. And so that resulted in our clients changing the internal makeup of the building from predominantly one bedroom units in the condominium building to a more equal rate of 2 bedroom and 1 bedroom in a rental building. And so that reduction of units from 147 to 133 was done within the building, maintaining the almost exact same footprint of the building. No changes to the commercial makeup of the proposal, but with the reduction in residential units, my clients wanted to reduce the overall parking to be commensurate with the change in units. And you'll see that the new proposal is 173 parking spaces, which is an approximate ratio of 1.3 per unit. So essentially the same as the original. The problem my clients ran into is that with the OLT decision, we essentially shrink wrapped the building both from a parking perspective, a whole number instead of ratio, as well as the schedule that was referenced in the variance report. Instead of minimum setbacks, a schedule was attached to the decision which shrink wrapped the size of the building, the setbacks, step backs on the upper floors. Next slide, please. So just quickly, this is the original OLT approved site plan layout. It's a little hard to read on there, but it's just looking to give you some context about how the two proposals are essentially the same. The next slide shows the building elevations that were approved at the Ontario Land Tribunal. You can see a lot of difference in materiality and colors. When you look at the side elevations, you see the step backs on the facing Nellis and facing Main Street. And you can see that the building was very much not a mimic of the heritage structure, but that was the original design intent, was to kind of match that historic flavor. When we move to the next slide, you see the current site plan layout again, just to show you that essentially the site is exactly the same as what was approved at the OLT. Next slide just shows the comparison of the new building elevations again. Similar massing of the entire building facing the street. Slightly different color motif to allow the heritage building to stand out on its own. And you can still see on that side elevation some of those step backs from Main Street and Nellis. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. So the design changes that we're talking about were not only born of my client's intent, but when we moved from OLT to the site plan process, we undertook what we call a design charrette. This is something we implemented on the Century Condos project in downtown Grimsby, where we wanted to sit down with town and regional staff, as well as our designers, and sit down and look at the building design and see what changes we could come up to make sure that everyone around the table was happy. So that's how we came from the OLT design building to the iteration that is with the site plan review today. So it was a really collaborative effort between both our designers as well as town and regional staff. Next slide, please. So this is showing the north and east elevations of the building. So not the street sides, but the external and the external sides. Next slide. So this is trying to provide a bit of context to compare the two building designs side by side to show that they're virtually the same building. You can see the massing of the buildings with two distinctive sides with the change in the middle. The step backs from the third and fourth floor on the Main Street side are still effectively the same, as well as the step back on the third level on the Nellis Road side, which is the left side of that dwelling. So aside from color materiality, the biggest change on the front of the building was removing some articulation to go with a more simplified uniform facade wall. Next slide. The next two slides give you a more clear plan view indication of what was changed from OLT to the site plan process. OLT approved plan is on your right-hand side, and the proposed site plan is on the left. You'll see the main change between those two facades. This is the Nellis Road facade. So the main change is just an articulated bump out on the middle of that right-hand side facade in favor of a uniform flat facade there. And the issue was that shrink-wrapped schedule from the OLT decision included very finite dimensions, whereas we would normally have a minimum and then there'd be some tolerance baked into that based on our preferred design. So when you look at this facade specifically, the OLT decision had a dimension of 5.16 on the parking lot side of that building, whereas the current site plan version is 5.08. So we're talking about 8 centimeters of difference between the two plans. That's an illustration of how close we are. Next slide, please. Next slide shows the Main Street facade. It's a little messy on that image, but when you see it maybe on the screen in front of you, you can see that we've now got the top one is a site plan and the bottom is the OLT decision. So you'll see that there's a lot of articulation on that OLT version versus the current iteration, which is a more flat or uniform facade wall. And again, so that schedule that was attached to the OLT decision baked in dimensions to all that articulation on the facade wall. So when we moved forward with the uniform wall, we didn't meet a lot of those dimensions. So we still meet the minimum dimension that was at the OLT, which is 3.05. That's still a minimum dimension we're meeting. And my recollection is that the step backs on the building from the third floor to the fourth floor, in one case we're talking, I think it was 30 centimeters or 1 foot difference between the dimensions. And in one case, the setbacks were actually increased slightly. And then my last slide is the schedule that was also included in the report. This just shows the OLT version, which is the black line of the plan, and then the red line of the plan over top to illustrate how we're changing from the OLT version to the site plan version. So again, the dimensions mainly just impact those facade walls. No changes to the north and east side lot lines, so no change to what the building will be seen from the townhouses to the north. No change to what will be seen from the future Coles development. Mainly, we're just dealing with what that articulated design looked like along the facade. Again, the step backs on the third story on Nellis have been retained. And there are minor changes to the step backs on the third and fourth floor on the Main Street facade. So we think they're pretty minor. We're reflecting a change in density with a change in parking, and we're reflecting minor changes that were really born of a collaborative process between our designers and the town at the design charrette and the site plan process. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Walter has his hand up right now. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to also add that you noticed that you didn't receive Heritage comments, but the Heritage staff have reviewed the application, and they have no concerns regarding the changes to the plan. They actually support the changes to the plan. And note that there's still a modification to the approval of the heritage permit that's required. So a heritage permit was obtained, which is tied to the previous plan. So a new permit needs to be issued with regard to the revisions to the plan. So that's still in their hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Anything from the committee at this moment? Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just had an observation. So, I'm in support of the motion. The one thing I wanted to touch on was parking. So right now we have less units. So I think it's 133, correct? And using the same kind of ratio. So we currently have less units and less parking, which makes sense. I have no problem with that. But from what my understanding, though, is we're not necessarily decreasing the density of the building. And so in theory, and, I'm, just sort of throwing this out here, should the units go up between this approval and it finally being built, it's not my understanding that the parking then would have to increase. Like, I don't know if the unit to parking ratio is inextricably linked. So if it's not, I would like to, and listening to the gentleman's comments about sort of timing, I'd like to sort of set a condition that in the final site plan that there's no more than the current number of units as proposed, which is 133. That way, the decision we make on parking can't change based on the density of the building, should it need to change.
Okay, so from what I gather, if I just repeat what you said, that we're locking in the number of units in this decision so that it cannot increase. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Dylan?
Vis-a-vis the parking decision that's then tied to it, we're making an amendment on the parking based on the number of units using a current ratio. So I think we can either set a condition that the number of units can't change, or that should the number of units change in the final design at site plan, the number of parking spaces must change as well. Because I just don't think that the density of the building is necessarily changing, right? I of course I am not a planner with condominiums to rentals and everything else, but parking is going to be a premium here and everywhere in Grimsby in the coming years, as we know. And I just want to sort of protect the committee's decision that we were prudent in, thinking about this, and that should changes, to the number of units, not negatively impact on the number of spaces based on the decision that we make today.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to add? Okay. Yep. Yeah, I understand now. If I could call Jared back up. Do you have any response to what Dylan was saying about not in our decision, we want to lock in a ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member. I get what we've been looking at it as more of a maximum number, or we were coming down from it. We never thought about going the other way with the number. To Mr. Bailey's comment, I do understand it. The concern that, if we go up from 133 to something else and we're locked in at a whole number again, then it seems like but to that point, I have been conversing with Mr. Basic as well as my client, and they're okay with us fixing a ratio to the number of units.
Yeah, I think, sorry if I can jump in, Mr. Chair. So I think right now we're using is it a ratio of 1.3? Is that what we're doing? I think it is. It was on your second slide. I just couldn't remember it. I think it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If we could lock in the ratio of parking to units, then I think that I'm hoping shows the community that we've done our due diligence as a committee of adjustment, but also then would allow you and your client in the town, should the number of units have to change, that would have to be a consideration in that decision. I would propose that as a fair condition, but I'm certainly happy to hear other members and your thoughts on it, sir.
Yeah, I guess because the bylaw's been superseded by the OLT decision, they didn't put a ratio in, like the zoning bylaw has a requirement of 1.29 spaces per unit, but this decision says 180, whatever it was, 189 spaces for that many units. But like if they come back and say, well, actually we jigged the plan and we've got 135 units, now we got to come back again and do it again. So it might give it a little bit more flexibility with a ratio that if more tweaks happen, or if a commercial unit gets turned into a residential unit or something like that, I don't know, or vice versa, it's going to screw it up again. So it's a good point, Dylan.
Yeah, I agree. Anything more to add on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said, I am conferring with Mr. Basic and my client. We're amenable to a ratio.
Thank you.
One other question. There was a comment from planning staff about recommending the committee allow for a tolerance of 5 centimeters for the approved building set. Is that built into this decision? Or is there a suggestion that we add that as a condition? It's just in the staff memo recommendation about the tolerance?
I would recommend that we add that as a condition.
Well, is that not a suggestion from planning?
It is.
Is that a suggestion from planning?
It is. Yeah, just because the dimensions are so precise.
I agree 100%.
And to the centimeter, and it's not, again, we'd hate to have to come back again for another variance if there's a slight misalignment of a centimeter.
I've cut off your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so then I would suggest anybody making the recommendation or the motion that tolerance of the 5 centimeter be added as a condition as well, as suggested by planning staff. That's a fair recommendation too.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, or is there any in the public? Is there anybody online right now? I see 3. Is there any more? No? Okay. Then do we have a motion from the committee? Dylan? We're going to make...
Sure. Oh, you're going to make me do it. Okay. All right. No problem. Be it resolved that minor variance application A0525 for 133 and 137 Main Street East to reduce the number of required parking spaces to 173, whereas 189 parking spaces are required as per zoning requirements of bylaw 1445 as amended by OLT 21-001631, and to replace Schedule 76 of Appendix A to bylaw number 1445 as amended with respect to setbacks and step backs from Main Street as illustrated in the plan be approved as they meet the 4 conditions, with the following 2 conditions. The first being that the number of units, that the number of parking spaces be a ratio between the number of units in the building to the ratio of 1.3 spaces per unit. And the second being, let me just get the second being that the setbacks and step backs have a tolerance of plus or minus 5 centimeters. Does that, Kevin, help me out here? Does that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Those 2 things sort of, does that?
I agree.
Work?
I would support those as you suggested.
Okay, so is that a second then? Oh, sorry, you got to, state your reasons, Dylan, please.
Oh, sorry. No, it meets the intent of all 4 of the 4 tests.
I'll second that.
Okay, perfect. And Kevin's going to second it, so we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. No one opposed. That's carried and subject to the 20-day appeal period. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. So the next meeting of the Committee of Adjustment will be held on March 18th, 2025, and that adjourns our meeting for this evening. Thank you all very much.
Recording stopped.